Serious question. How are people surviving on minimum wage right now? I mean, rent, groceries, gas, all of that is very, very expensive to live on your own. So my question to you is how are you surviving right now currently in today's society?
It's kind of crazy to think how fast things adds up nowadays. You're not even trying to spend much, and somehow every month still feel more expensive than the last. We already talked about this cost of living topic before, but this time it feels less like a trend and more like a constant reality people can't escape, including myself. And from everyday essential to monthly bill, everything just keep creeping up. In this video, we're taking another look at what people are dealing with right now and how they're trying to manage it. And yeah, let's get into it.
America has literally built a system where being poor is more expensive. And nobody talks about how backwards that is. Like, if you're already struggling, everything costs more. On a bill you couldn't afford? Well, now you owe more. Miss a payment because you were trying to juggle rent and groceries? Well, now your credit drops and you owe even more money. Overdraw your account by a few dollars? Well, now you owe $50. Like, this system punishes you for already being behind. We're always rewarding millionaires while the people that are struggling the most just simply end up paying the most money. But everybody still says, work harder, budget better. The reality right now is the economy is brutal. It is so hard to get ahead right now. How are you supposed to get ahead whenever you fall behind a little bit and the system just keeps pushing you back further and further? Everything is insane right now. Rent is at an all-time high. Groceries are so expensive. I don't understand how we're supposed to get ahead in this economy anymore. Don't get me wrong, budgeting does help. I literally have to budget with mine or else I don't know where any of my money would be going. But it doesn't make up for the fact that the system is literally designed to fail us. So if you're struggling right now, you are not alone.
Yeah, this clip says because it's pointing out something that a lot of people feel but don't always put into words. It's not just that things are expensive, it's that, being broke come with extra penalty. You already behind and then every missed payment or mistake, just stack more costs on top of you. And that feeling of, I'm trying but I'm still falling further behind is what makes this so frustrating, right? It's not just about working harder at that point. It starts to feel like no matter what you do, it always playing catch-up games. And a lot of this system are built around fee, interest, and risk. If you think about it, if you miss a payment, company charge late fees, and if your credit score dropped, future loans or even basic things like insurance become more expensive, right? If your bank account goes negative, you get hit with the overdraft fees. Individually, each of this might seem small or justified from a business perspective, but when you think about it, when you stack them all together, they hit the hardest on people who are already struggling. Someone with money can avoid this fee entirely, while someone living paycheck to paycheck is more likely to run into them repeatedly. And that's why it can feel like the system is working against you. It's not just the base cost of living going up, rent, grocery bills. It is also the added costs that come from having less financial cushion. And what creates this cycle that is hard to break is when more of your income is going toward fees, higher interest, and basic survival, there's less left to save or invest in moving forward, and that make it harder to build stability over time. And that's where the frustration come from. People aren't just dealing with high costs, they're dealing with a system where a small setback can have a long-term consequences. And that's why so many people feel stuck right now, even when they're doing everything, quote unquote supposed to do.
To cope with inflation, I've stopped cooking meat at home. I don't buy meat products, I don't buy dairy, I don't buy eggs. Everything is fully vegetarian when I'm cooking at home. I'm not a vegetarian by conscience. I am a vegetarian by pure economics. You'd be amazed at how far tofu and black beans can go in my cooking repertoire. My girlfriend's veg anyway, so it's fine. And also, I make a really mean vegan mac and cheese, but just the fact that it's not because I want to, it's kind of because I financially have to, that's what's upsetting. Like, I live in Florida. Shouldn't seafood be like the cheapest thing we have? No, quite the opposite. Seafood is so expensive here, and we literally are surrounded by an ocean. Make that make sense. I also haven't bought name brand products in a really long time. I always buy generic now. Grocery shopping used to be my favorite part of the day. Now it's very less fun. I've done plenty of videos on here where I'll buy like 8 things and my basket ends up being $60 or just something astronomical. And that's always a great video because it's like, wow, this number is higher than last time I made this video. Like last week for Valentine's Day when I saw that bouquet of 12 roses, 12 flowers for $46, I just about lost all faith. Grocery prices are insane.
Financial markets are going nuts right now. The 10-year treasury yield is shooting up, and mortgage rates are getting more expensive. To put this in like perspective that anybody could understand, if you were trying to buy a $600,000 home, it would cost you $168 per month more to do that today than it would have cost you the day before we went to war with Iran. Like, I know war is costly in so many different ways, but when it impacts everyday people in America, their ability to afford their lives, it really starts to hit home. It's just so nuts that now we are sending ground troops in, according to reporting from military.com and from Reuters, even though just yesterday the president was saying that wasn't going to happen. This kind of volatility in terms of like what could potentially happen with this war is causing volatility in markets, and it's making it more expensive to buy a home.
Yeah, this one of those clips that show how something can feel far away suddenly hit you right at home. Most people hear about war or global conflict and think that it's political or international, but they don't immediately connect it to their monthly bill. Then you hear something like your mortgage just went up, $168 overnight, and now that's real, right? And that's the part that catches people off guard. You're not changing anything about your life, but suddenly the cost of buying a home just got more expensive because, of something happening across the world. And what happening here came down to, how financial market react to uncertainty when there's, geopolitical tension like war or threat of escalation. Investors start shifting money around quickly, and that movement, affect, things like treasury yields, and those yields directly influence mortgage rate. So, when the 10-year treasury go up, mortgage rate usually follow, and even a small increase in rates can have, a noticeable impact on a monthly payment, right? Especially for, something as large as a home loan. And that's why, a $600,000 home suddenly costs more per month without the price of the house, even changing. And it's not about the housing either. Volatility in the market can ripple into borrowing costs, investment, and overall confidence in the economy. So if someone isn't buying a house right now, this shift can still affect the broader cost of living.
Everything is just so damn expensive right now. It's insane. Nothing extravagant, just went out of town for spring break, get a nice change of scenery, do something different. Didn't even pay for flights, drove to my destination, which is about 4 hours away. And the amount of money that I spent just from eating out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I spent this much on one meal just for me to turn around and be hungry again in 2 hours. God damn, I'm so tired of this.
This economy is some bullshit. And I know it's some bullshit because I remember when I was in high school, I took a personal finance class. And one of our assignments was we had to find a career we wanted, right? We had to go on Indeed or a job website and find like a wage, a salary, whatever for that job, right? Then with that salary, we had to find a house that we could afford and a car that we could afford, right? I don't remember what career, whatever that I picked, but I know it was around making like $80-some thousand a year. I was able to have that career, have a nice car, and a nice house and still be chilling. I don't think people understand how out of hand the cost of living is. For a long time, a brand new car was gonna run you between 20 to 25 stacks. Them luxury BMWs, Mercedes, whatever, that'll run you about 30. You know what I'm saying? Them nice Altimas, Camrys, and all this and all that. Brand new, them things used to be about 15 or 18 stacks. Nice ass apartments. They gonna run you about $800 or $900. A regular, schmegular apartment, maybe about $600-700. You living in the hood, it was probably about $400 a month. Everything made sense. Now, especially with the apartments, it's either I want to get taxed for some bullshit or I want to live in the hood. There's like no in between anymore. The housing market is crazy. Used cars, the price that people be trying to sell these used cars for, if you want a decent price for a used car, it's gonna have over 100,000 miles on it.
What is a livable wage in 2026? Let's run the numbers and figure this out. Let's say you want to live by yourself and you get an apartment for $1,500 plus utilities, $400 for groceries, $300 for a used car, $150 for insurance, $150 for employee-sponsored healthcare, $100 for gas, $100 for personal care, $50 for cell phone, $50 for internet is $2,800, which I think is survival. That is the bare minimum that Americans need in 2026. So if you want to go further than that, I would say $200 for savings a month, $200 investing, $200 for fun, and $100 for subscriptions would put you at $3,500. This is a pretty cool life. Now, in this example, there's no credit cards, no student loans. This person does not have children. They're not saving for anything luxurious. They got their savings, but that's more for emergencies, not for a house or anything like that. But $3,500, pretty cool. If you make $15 an hour, your take-home pay is going to be $22.10. So that's going to put you below surviving. So you're probably going to need a roommate making $15 an hour. If you make $20 an hour, your take home is going to bump up to $28.80, which is going to put you right at surviving with $80 to spare, but it's surviving paycheck to paycheck, and you're kind of stressed out because you don't have much of savings or investing or anything like that. $25 an hour is going to put you at $35.60. I would say this is livable. You get everything on the list, and you've got an extra $60, but it's livable paycheck to paycheck. And then $30 an hour or $62,400 is the first wage that I think puts you in the thriving category. Your take home is $42.40, and you have an extra $750 a month after everything on this list. So in America in 2026, I would say anything below $30 an hour, you're probably going to benefit heavily from a roommate, whether it's a friend, a partner, a spouse, because it's going to alleviate some of that rent burden, but it's also someone that has low debt. And it depends on where you live and how you define livable or thriving, depending on what your goals are in life. But I'd say as a blanket statement, a livable wage in 2026 in America, I would say about $25 to $30 an hour.
Yeah, you know, this breakdown is actually one of those more realistic ones because it doesn't exaggerating things, you know, it shows how tight things really are. And what stands out is how quickly you go from surviving to barely breathing financially. There's no luxury here, right? No crazy spending, just basic living. And it's already pushing close to $3,000 a month, right? And that part really hits, you know, because it's when you compare that to the actual wages, you hear $15 or, you know, $20 an hour and think that you should be decent. But when you run the numbers like this, you're either below survival or just barely scraping by with almost no room for errors. And the key takeaway is how much of the income is going toward fixed expenses. You know, rent alone is taking up a huge portion. And once you add up the essential like groceries, transportation, insurance, and healthcare, most of your paycheck is already gone before you even, you know, think about saving or enjoying life, right? What makes this even more difficult is that this example assumes no major debt, right? No student loans, no credit card, no unexpected expenses. In reality, if you think about it, a lot of people are carrying those additional costs, right? Which pushes them even further into the surviving category. And that's why the difference between, you know, $20 an hour and $30 an hour is very massive, right? It's not just extra $10, is the difference between constant stress and having you know, a little breathing room, right? That gap is where saving, investing, and any sense of stability actually start to exist. And this is why so many people are relying on roommates, dual incomes, or side hustle, right? The cost of living has reach a point where a single income at what used to be considered decent wage just doesn't stretch the same way anymore. And you know, it's also reshaped how people think about independence. Living alone, saving money, and planning for the future used to feel like the, you know, the normal milestones. Now those same goals require, you know, significantly higher income, you know, just to maintain a basic level of financial stability. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.